Throughout this weekend, we're celebrating LWT's 30th birthday with a number of programs illustrating how LWT was never able to resist trying something new. This was particularly evident in our coverage of sport. Saturday afternoons meant World of Sport, a high-energy mix of professional wrestling, racing and football. The program was presented by Dickie Davies with Brian Moore in the commentary box. And they're still at it. Here they are with some sporting memories.
It sounds familiar, doesn't it? Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to Sporting Memories. This is a birthday party and I'm delighted to be here with some good old friends to look back on some of the great sporting moments that have thrilled London viewers over the past 30 years as part of London Weekend Television's birthday celebrations. Major events dominated by world-famous personalities.
What's Pele now? What a beautiful goal from Pele! El Rey Pele!
People in England that after Joe Frazier and James Ellis have a showdown, I'm going to retire the winner.
Moments of sporting history.
Beautiful, 147.
From the sublime to the frankly ridiculous.
Tunisia needs one more fall to claim her second successive women's championship.
From supreme athletic achievement.
Coe's going to win the 1500 metres and Ovek's going to get only a bronze medal. A fantastic run by Coe. He's done it. He's got the gold.
To sport where athleticism isn't quite so important.
Yes! What a
And of course the wrestling, where sport and showbiz collided head-on.
Oh, yes, the chop on the inside. Beautiful timing by Rivers.
And joining me for this afternoon of nostalgia, four great friends who played a major part in the London Weekend Television sports story. He retired last month after 30 years behind the mic as Britain's top football commentator, Brian Moore. ITV's voice of boxing, and he's still going, Reg Guttridge. A leading member of the team that revolutionised racing coverage, first on ITV and then on Channel 4, Bruff Scott. Well, the move from international sport to television is a pretty well-worn path nowadays, but this guy was one of the first, half of that St. and Greasy double act, Ian St. John. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, all of you. Brian, I suppose your debut on television coincided with that of London Weekend.
It did indeed, and when I look back, some of my happiest Saturdays, I think, were spent around here. It was a great programme, don't forget that. I also spent some of my coldest Saturdays because I used to have to go out to do on the ball on frozen White Hart Lanes and all that. But,
after a good lunch,
after a good lunch, yeah. But it was they were good times.
And Reg, you started with the first programme on World of Sport, didn't you?
65, I think that was,
yeah.
wasn't it? When I had to go to London Airport and meet a famous American boxer who didn't arrive, so I said all the things that he would have said had he arrived.
In your own inimitable fashion, too.
Slowly.
And Bruff, when did you join in?
71, and the first one was at Newcastle. I had lots of notes, and there was a thunderstorm, and they were all washed away.
Oh,
I haven't got much better since.
And the Saint?
Well, I'm obviously the younger member of the group because it was, what, 20 years since I joined. Took over from Brian on the ball, the hot seat there, doing the football, so 20 years ago.
You're going to enjoy all the things you're going to see, I know, in a big, big way. Well, now, London Weekend Television provided ITV's sports flagship programme from 1968 to 1985, something I was privileged to present from these studios right here on the banks of the Thames. World of Sport was a mixture of action, both live and recorded, features, previews and results, but it had already been on London screens for 3 years before taking its place on London Weekend. John Brumley, who moved from Fleet Street to run those early programmes, takes up the story.
We went on the air, I remember, in 65. January 65 was the first ever World of Sport. The previous week in the rehearsal, we had these dry runs. The floor manager, lovely chap called Ian, he threw his script board down and said, I'm not going to work with amateurs. It was all that. We didn't know what we were doing, but it was quite good fun. Went on the air, and the week before they said, what are we going to call this programme? So they said, well, what about Wide World of Sport? Now, there was a program in America, a very famous program called Wide World of Sport. So I looked at the running order for the first show and thought, now, let's have a look at this. So we got wrestling from Wembley, we've got table tennis from Lewisham, we got snooker, in black and white, from the National Liberal Club. And the only thing we hadn't, was outside London was some racing from Catterick. So we hadn't really gone beyond the North Circular. So I suggested, should we just drop the wide, should we, and just call it World of Sport? And that's how it started. The BBC had all the contracts. You know, we had nothing really. So we sort of went to America and bought things like Acapulco cliff diving and New York Farmers Championships and all those, all that kind of mix of different. And we had the wrestling. That was a great thing about it. We had the wrestling at 4 o'clock. And the nation sort of switched on at 4 o'clock for the wrestling, which the BBC hated. I mean, they might have all the pure sport. They had test match cricket and rugby union and motor racing in those days. But they couldn't compete with wrestling at 4 o'clock. And then London Weekend was born in '68. Jimmy Hill was head of sport, and I was deputy head of sport. And Dickie became the first, the host then, of the show. All very excited. New studios, new set, new everything, new company, London Weekend. But off we went with Dickie and the football, and at 4 o'clock, the moment critique, when the wrestling came on, for us, the big part of the show, the unions pulled the plugs. We went to black.
Did you take this with a stiff upper lip, or were you a bit sort of distraught?
No, I was very cross. I threw things. We had something called the fish bowl, and I was editing the programme. I just sort of threw half a fruit bowl at the wall and things like that. But apart from that, it was all right. Went out a few jars afterwards.
Brommer's byword, a few jars afterwards. The fruit's here, but don't start throwing it.
That's still the same fruit. By the way, I just saw there the names coming up, all the, you know, the first show. And
yeah.
Who was Richard Davies? Was he on before you?
Me.
You were Richard Davies.
Yeah, well, I started
Richard
that way. You see, then Jimmy Hill said, I'd never heard anyone call you Richard. They all call you Dickie, so it became Dickie Davies, and it made a hell of a difference, I have to say, really.